Good morning and welcome to day 2, our final day of the Como UK conference for 2022. I'm Rachel Murphy, I'm Director for Scotland with Como, and I'm joining you from a very cold and in fact now snowy Edinburgh, which is a wonderful setting for day 2 of our conference. We have a really busy day. Sorry, my video has just cut. I'm going to start it again. There we go. Thank you. We have a really busy day 2 of our conference. If there's anything that you missed on day 1, then please don't worry. We will be putting out the video recordings in the next couple of weeks. To just get us going, in case you haven't ever met Como and you've fallen into this conference by accident, it's lovely to have you join us. We are the national charity across the UK for the public benefit of shared transport. And we'll be starting day 2 of our conference with an address from Mr. Patrick Harvie, who is co-leader of the Greens in Scotland and also Minister for Active Travel. It's a real privilege for us at Como to have Patrick joining us. We're active travel delivery partners of Transport Scotland, so it's a real great pleasure to have the Minister join with us this morning and give us our keynote speak. Please let me hand over to Mr. Patrick Harvie. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Rachel, and thanks for the invitation. It's really a lovely opportunity to speak to you at the start of today's proceedings for Como UK and address what I know is a varied audience, talking about what we're doing across government in Scotland on sustainable transport, integrating active travel with other transport modes and much more besides. I'm doing this a few days after being in Copenhagen for the European Green Party Congress, and you know, I was in what's pretty close to bike heaven or transport heaven in that context. I changed trains in Amsterdam on the way, and again, cities that have made a transformational change over decades to be more sustainable and more amenable to active travel, to walking, wheeling, and cycling. And just outside my hotel, yes, of course, why wouldn't there be a fleet of bikes right outside the hotel for their guests to use? Large bikes, small bikes, bikes with child seats, cargo bikes, and this was completely normal. So you're finding me in a moment in a week when I've been slightly reinvigorated by the vision of what we could achieve if we follow through on the commitments that the Scottish Government has and the passion and creativity that's being brought to bear by folk working on these themes right across the country. As the Scottish Government's first minister with a dedicated title for active travel, it's a role in which I combine responsibility for that topic with a number of other themes like heat in buildings, reform of tenants' rights. For me, that job is about how these things connect with each other and integrate to shape the way that we live, the kind of communities that we live in. And active travel fits into a wider transport landscape in a very similar way. It has to sit together with all of the other aspects of what we talk about as a travel hierarchy, but which don't always feel that way in real life. So I work closely with the Minister for Transport, Jenny Gilruth, as well as Michael Matheson, the Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero, Energy and Transport. But there are people elsewhere in government, whether that's around planning, whether it's around economy, whether it's around local government, who also have a role to play in bringing together this shared approach. Now, the shared transport sector has grown and evolved hugely over the last decade. There have been many new bike share and car share operators joining the market, testing innovative ideas. And we support those in a number of different ways across government. Given my responsibilities, you'd expect me to say what I'm mostly going to focus on today is the active travel side, as well as growth in the popularity of initiatives like lift share and community car clubs. We've seen bike share schemes increasing in number and branching out into the kind of bikes that they offer, more e-bikes, cargo bikes, trikes, and so on. As the minister who's responsible, of course, that's an area that's really exciting for me. You won't be surprised to know that I passionately believe that safe, high quality infrastructure and placemaking that puts walking, wheeling and cycling first is my top priority. But of course, the physical environment also needs for people to feel competent about accessing it. And there are those other barriers that mean that people don't always feel competent, even when infrastructure is there. And for cycling, they also need to have access to bikes, the right kind of bikes in the range and diversity of bikes that are out there. So that's where different sharing models can promote equitable access to cycling for everyday trips. Now in Scotland, household access to bikes is really connected to income. 34% of all Scottish households have got access to one or more bikes, but that's just 16% of households with an annual income under £10,000. Just let that sink in. The people who are hardest up in our society have the least access to the cheapest form of transport. So it's really, really important that we continue to expand access to bikes in every form that we can in order to redress that balance. Published in December last year, we worked with Cycling UK to undertake Scotland's first adaptive bike share survey. And that work showed that there is significant interest in bike sharing amongst disabled people who need adaptive bikes in Scotland. With information from over 200 responses, this survey is helping our continued work with delivery partners and disability groups to make travelling by bike an easier choice for everyone, including older and disabled people in particular. In April this year, I was excited to join Lochaber Environmental Group in launching Fort William's new e-bike scheme, High Bike. Scottish Government funding helped not only deliver the bikes and the charge points, but also discounted and free memberships so that more people have got easier access to affordable and sustainable cycling options. It's a good example not only of a bike share scheme in a rural setting, also of the importance of collaboration between organisations, with the European elements of the funding for the project being administered by the Energy Saving Trust on behalf of Transport Scotland. The scheme will soon be even more accessible and potentially help take even more vehicles off the road, with the recent announcement that a total of 15 new cargo e-bikes are being ordered for spring delivery as part of an expansion of the whole scheme. These bikes are quite a bit longer than the current e-bikes on offer, and they can carry 3 children or a load of shopping on the back. That's just a couple of examples of how collective approaches to bikes can improve access. And that's important because in my role, I'm overseeing the biggest ever budget for active travel in Scotland's history. Year by year, steps on the way to our commitment to allocate £320 million, or 10% of Scotland's transport budget, to walking, wheeling and cycling by the year 2024 to 25. So for the last few years, we've seen the budget growing in the direction of meeting that target, and I'm confident that we're going to be able to achieve a huge amount. It's a level of investment that equates to £58 per person in Scotland. That's significantly higher than other parts of the UK. And I would say that in the hope that all parts of the UK will close the gap and catch up with what we're trying to do here and see the same benefits applied elsewhere. I think there's a shared recognition across governments of the value of active travel investment. So it's about seeing that recognition reflected in the actual budgets they spend. Now, the amount of investment is, of course, really crucial, and we need to sustain that for the long term if we're going to make the kind of transformational change that cities like the ones I mentioned in Copenhagen and Amsterdam have achieved long ago. But it's also very much about what happens on the ground, or literally going into the ground. How much we invest has to translate into how well we invest. In order to deliver this rapidly growing active travel programme, we've initiated what we call a transformation project, looking at the delivery model, making sure that the ambition of our funding and policy can be met with a new delivery model that's got the scale and the flexibility to meet the new challenges. We've already begun some work to streamline and focus the funding, and working closely with delivery partners like Paths for All. The transformation project is being delivered in 2 phases. First of all, evaluation and evidence gathering, aiming to assess the existing active travel delivery model, identifying where the constraints are, what the opportunities are. And then phase 2 will use this evidence to develop and prioritize proposals for changing the delivery model. And this will culminate in a report to provide evidence proposals for holistic changes to the model of active travel delivery in Scotland. Now, as part of this project, we've already looked at what's happening both in England and in Wales. Part of the reason that I was pleased to accept your invitation to speak is because I believe that we've got a lot to learn from each other. That's as true as a general principle as when we look at specific interventions. When we talk about holistic interventions, we know that people involved in car clubs, by giving up ownership of a private car, are also more likely to walk and cycle. We need to make sure that those active travel choices are supported when people want to make them. And we're doing that in many, many ways. Scotland's cycle repair scheme, for example, is providing free repairs and maintenance to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it, to get people, to get thousands of people across Scotland on their bikes. Repair is a really important one. You know, using a bike can be the cheapest way of getting about, but if the cost of a repair that you need is more than the cost of the bus fare, then there's a danger that people fall out of the habit and just go back onto other forms of transport. Our access bike scheme is providing people on lower incomes with a chance to obtain a bike through short and long-term loans and gifting. In addition to delivering the Bikeability programme throughout schools in Scotland, Cycling Scotland supports over 10,000 adults each year with training for ride leaders, patrollers, instructors and commuters. And we support Sustrans to deliver behaviour change projects, including the successful iBike project, empowering children, parents and teachers to walk, cycle together to and from school. This year, the programme will work across at least 10 local authorities and reach 16,000 children. I started off by saying that active travel is just one part of a complex transport landscape with multiple elements needing to fit together. As you can see from the examples of our work in schools and elsewhere, integrating active travel is about what we do across the system as a whole, not just with transport policy, but education, housing, regeneration, economic development, and so on. The National Transport Strategy establishes the sustainable travel hierarchy as a guiding principle, embedded in all of our policy and decision making to promote walking, wheeling, cycling, public transport, and bike, car, and ride sharing over single occupancy car use. The sustainable investment hierarchy is at the core of our second strategic transport projects review, which we'll launch later today. This will inform the Scottish Government's transport investment programme over the next 20 years. And through STPR2, we've aimed to first reduce the need to travel unsustainably, make better use of existing infrastructure and enhance it before investing in any new capacity. And the hierarchy is also central to the infrastructure investment plan that the Scottish Government has. The places we live in have a direct impact on our health and on the environment. As set out in the programme for government for 21-22, and over the course of this whole session of the Scottish Parliament, we'll deliver on our vision for 20-minute neighbourhoods across Scotland, places where people can meet their needs locally within a 20-minute walk, wheel or cycle from where they live, cutting emissions and encouraging active travel. 20-minute neighbourhoods is a key principle of our new national planning framework, which is just completing its parliamentary process right now and looks to embed sustainable placemaking in how we do development right throughout the country. When combined with our target to reduce car kilometres by 20% over the course of this decade, phase out the need for new petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2032, and support the rollout of electric car charging infrastructure, our aim is to reshape and reduce transport demand, bringing down transport-related emissions and improving public health through active and sustainable travel. It's all a big challenge. And to achieve, in particular, that 20% reduction in car kilometres, we know that the planning system needs to prioritise car use reduction. That'll create new opportunities and lay strong foundations for a broad range of policy interventions. Demand for transport and the choices that people make in relation to car use are interwoven with how we plan and use space in our communities and our society. So by continuing to provide viable, attractive alternatives to single occupancy private car journeys, we'll help make villages, towns and cities, every community in Scotland, better places to live, work and enjoy spending time. Listen, thanks very much again for inviting me to speak at the start of today's session. I believe strongly that active travel and behaviour change and an integrated approach to active travel, how it fits with everything else that we're doing, requires this broad holistic approach across government. It requires a wide range of interventions, and shared mobility has a critical role to play in that. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more of the thoughts and observations and contributions from speakers today. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. That was just a brilliant start for our final day of the conference. I was particularly struck by the statistics you gave around areas of poverty. Como's been working on supporting communities in areas of multiple deprivation that will be getting low emission zones in the next couple of years, in order that those communities are not left behind and are really brought, into the kind of active and sustainable future that we also strongly want for Scotland. So I was just really struck by those reflections, and thank you so very much for your time. I know that you've got another call that you have to go to, so I won't hold you too long, but thank you again, and I'm sure your colleagues who are on the call with us today will be able to share the kind of reflections through the day. Thank you so much for your time. Brilliant, thank you. So we're going into our first session of the conference now, which is our Scotland shared and net zero. As you've heard from the Minister, there are some really, really ambitious targets across Scottish Government, and this session is just looking at all the ways that, from Transport Scotland all the way down to community schemes on the ground, Scotland is moving towards a shared mobility future. To start our session off, we'll be beginning with one of our community videos from Huntly Development Trust. This is a video highlighting one of the groups that Como's worked with over the years, and we're just really excited to give you a snapshot of what's happening here in Scotland. After that, we'll be hearing a series of presentations, and I'll be asking our panellists just a couple of questions in between, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. This is the first session of the conference. We'll have 3 more sessions today, which we cannot wait to share with you. So we've got our sessions through the day, but then in the evening, if you're near to Edinburgh or London and you're looking out at the lovely snowy weather, I don't know where it's doing elsewhere, and thinking it's a wee bit chilly at home and I bet it's warmer in the pub, then please do join us at one of our 2 drinks receptions. You can register on the Como UK website. So without further ado, I will hand over to my colleague who will set up our video on Huntly Development Trust. Thank you.
The difference of schemes made in the community, we've had various people, testimonials, who hadn't cycled a bike for 20 years, were recovering from an illness or injury, elderly. They're now able to get about. It's had a positive effect on physical, mental well-being. That's talking about the bike specifically. With the cars, there's people who are saving thousands of pounds a year on motoring costs, not to mention the environmental impact. I'm Stuart Masson. I work for the Huntly Development Trust as the project manager for the Huntly Travel Hub. The scheme started following a community consultation called Room to Thrive, where we addressed the town as a whole, and getting about was identified as an area where we needed to improve in Huntly. So with us being a community organisation, we addressed this need and decided we would introduce the Travel Hub. Our shared transport schemes consist of 3 vehicles, 2 of which are hybrid and 1 full electric. We also have 24 electric bikes, range of step-through hybrid bikes to more robust mountain bikes. And we also have a community minibus. People access the scheme by mostly our social media channels initially, or email or telephone, or they can pop in. Then one of us picks up the inquiry, finds out whether it's a car, bike, minibus that they would like to use. So regarding sustainability of the scheme, it's tricky, but we're moving in the right direction year on year. So we're constantly closing the gap, and as an organisation, that's why we've continued pursuing the active travel project, because it is demonstrating that it is delivering results. The future of the scheme is exciting. We've got 3 cars, we've already planning a 4th. We've already got premises purchased, so in 2023 we're going to have actual premises to run all the operations from. From the 250 people who hired our bikes last year, 20 of them have gone on to purchase their own electric bike. So we're offering a platform for people to try and test alternative transport methods with the view to making a lifestyle change.
I really hope that has given you a bit of optimism, a bit of hope going into this final day. It's certainly given me a bit of energy. I'm going to start the session now. One thing that I neglected to say earlier, if you do have a question for one of our speakers, please do pop it in the chat. I won't be responding to hands up, I'll just be responding to questions in the chat, and will then invite you up to ask that question. So if there's something you want to know more about, then please do add it to the chat as we go through the session. Thanks so much. So to start us off, we'll be hearing from Bertrand Des, who is the Head of Transport, Climate Change Strategy and Engagement for Transport Scotland. Bertrand, it's so lovely to have you join us. Thank you.
Very good morning, everybody. Thanks, Rachel, for your introduction. I was really pleased to see the little project that shows really good work on the ground after having heard from the Minister and his national vision. My own policy is about what we call the route map to reduce car use for healthier, fairer and greener Scotland, and it's a national vision. You can see from the title of the route map that the policy is contributing to a greener, healthier and more active Scotland. Next. Scottish Government has committed to reducing car kilometres by 20% by 2030 from a 2019 baseline as part of the Climate Change Plan update published in December 2020. The policy outcome is a world-leading commitment demonstrating the level of ambition needed for Scotland to reach net zero. In January of this year, we published a route map that sets out how we will achieve a national reduction in car use. It includes not only system-level interventions that will support people at the individual level to reduce car use, but also 4 key sustainable travel behaviors for people to consider when planning a journey. You have them listed on the slide. To start with, reducing the need to travel, which was actually in Mr. Harvie's speech. We really need to reduce our travel. So reducing the need to travel, such as by using online options to access goods, services, amenities, and social connections, if these cannot be accessed locally in a sustainable way. The second behavior is living well locally by choosing local destinations, which can make it easier to switch to more sustainable modes and will reduce distance driven in a car if a car is still used. And I was really pleased to see the Huntley Shared Travel Hub, which is exactly what we mean by this behavioral change. The third behavior is switching modes to walk, wheel, cycle, or public transport where feasible. And last is combining trips or sharing journeys with another person if car use remains the only feasible option. This is where shared transport can play its part in helping reducing car use. The overall aim of the route map is to empower people to choose an option that fits their circumstances and travel needs. Next. The slide here shows some of the key interventions that will support people to being able to adopt one or more of the 4 behaviors. The full list of intervention is included in the route map. But as you can see, and as Mr. Harvie hinted, for example, the 20-minute neighborhood is part of this intervention as part of the forthcoming national planning framework. We are looking also at digital connectivity in Scotland through the broadband program, and so on and so forth. The route map is clear that local authorities' contributions, reflective of local circumstances, needs, and resources, will be especially critical across the range of interventions set out in the route map, including supporting car clubs and car sharing options. Car clubs are growing from strength to strength in Scotland and have the potential to reduce reliance on private cars and ownership, reducing inequalities and helping to protect our climate. Como UK 2021 report found that the average car club vehicle replaces 17 cars in Scotland. In addition, when considering the route map target, car clubs can play a role in combination with other interventions to support sustainable travel. Next slide. So why we need these changes is because transport is Scotland's biggest sectoral emitter, accounting for nearly 30% of Scotland's greenhouse gas emissions. Within that, car travel makes up nearly 40% of transport emissions. Modeling work has been clear that technological solutions, such as going all EVs, for example, electric vehicles, will not be enough to meet our commitment to net zero by 2040, and that we need to reduce the use of private vehicles as well as supporting a transition to lower emission vehicles. And within this, behavior change will be a fundamental requirement to achieve this reduction in car use. Mid-October, the UK Parliament House of Lords Environment and Climate Change Committee published a report which stated that 1/3 of emissions cuts in the UK must come from behavior change. Car use reduction supports, finally, the delivery of our national transport strategy 4 priorities that are here listed. Next slide, please. And the good news is that by doing this, we won't just be helping to tackle climate change. We will be helping people live better lives through improved health and well-being and greater social and economic inclusion. Current levels of car use have significant negative impacts on health and well-being through poor air quality, road danger, physical inactivity, noise pollution, and community severance, as well as negative impacts on the economy. Importantly, these negative impacts all disproportionately affect those who are already more vulnerable. So reducing car use is a key part of Scottish Government's commitment to reduce inequalities. Next slide, please. As noted in research by the Institute for Public Policy Research, low-income households are lower carbon emitters. They are not driving the climate crisis, nor are they driving most of the cars that fill our cities. Car access and usage is also lower amongst other groups, including women, older and younger people, disabled people, and people of non-white Scottish or British ethnicities. Yet for many decades, policy and investment decisions have prioritized space and access for car users. We understand that there is no one-size-fits-all, but we believe the route map contains a range of options for everyone, including businesses, to consider. We do not expect car use to reduce equally for all, including some businesses, those in rural areas and those who rely on cars for mobility or other reasons. But for those who are able to change their travel behavior, we want to recognize and enable that. Next slide, please. Data shows us that we need to support people to change their behavior in relation to a range of journey purposes. So here on the slide, you can see that community, shopping, and leisure are the most common reasons for car travel. But also on the right-hand side, you can see that around 4% of trips account for nearly 30% of the total kilometer driven. So we need also to focus on the short but also long trips. At the heart of our route map is a recognition that reducing car use will be harder for some groups than others, and a commitment to a fair or just transition to lower emissions that does not penalize groups that already suffer from disadvantage. This is why the 20% reduction target is a national target. It's not for any individuals or communities. Next slide. So when we developed this policy, we found a lot of opportunities to deliver on this. First one is with regard to the public support and business support that has been shown through various surveys. For example, 72% of respondents agreed that the way we live our lives will have to change substantially to address climate change. And a separate survey found that around 50% of respondents agreed it would be possible not to use their car for common trip types. In 2020, we started to track people's attitudes toward travel and transport to better understand the impacts of the pandemic on travel behaviors. And we have continued since then to track this behavior. And more than half of people recently surveyed told us that the cost of fuel has led to them driving less frequently or for fewer miles, and around a third say it's led them to switch to a different mode of transport for some of or all of their journeys. So this is where the cost crisis joins the dots with the climate emergency. These changes in behavior triggered by moments of change are good for people's pockets and for the planet. Some interventions as well outweigh the route map have the potential for further support car reduction, such as demand management to discourage car use. Transport Scotland commissioned consultancy analysis from AECOM to explore demand management options. And following a recent sift of all available options, the research will provide detailed appraisal of local and national road user charging schemes, covering quantified climate and economic impacts, including revenue-raising potential. The research will conclude later this month, and discussions are ongoing with Minister for Transport regarding next steps. Finally, car sharing schemes against the current cost of living should blossom, in my opinion, because at the moment, members can go to get their car when they need it. But in the future, under mobility as a service, their membership will make the connected and autonomous vehicle come to get them, making life so easier for people. Next slide, which is the other side of the coin with the challenges we are facing in doing this policy. And the first and foremost is human behavior that chooses always the path of least effort. We know that we make our travel selection based on the cost, and we in the future need to make car use less attractive by making active travel and public transport more convenient, and cost attractive whilst making car use less convenient and less cost attractive. And I can remember Mr. Harvie just pointed this exactly in the same way. Which brings me now on the second challenge of limited funding to just do that. And one solution to achieve that is partly to implement car demand management schemes. And this includes low traffic zones, bans from city centers, traffic calming measures, living streets designs, road user charging, such as distance charging or congestion charging, other levies such as the working place levy, the revenue of which could be reinvested into public transport locally. Which brings me to my third challenge about devolved powers. The main policy levers to disincentivize car use, fuel duty and vehicle excise duty, are reserved to the UK government. And despite approaches from Scottish ministers, there is no meaningful dialogue on this issue. So we will continue to press the UK government for a fair and progressive future transport tax system that reduces unnecessary travel, raises revenues to fund policies to support a shift to a more sustainable travel, and better incentivizes the transition to zero-emission vehicles for those who need them. Finally, the intervention set out in the roadmap will take time to fully be implemented and make effect. We know by forecast that the car use reduction will really start from 2025 onwards, so only 5 years before the target of 2030. And this brings a reporting risk as well as a delivery risk to manage over time. That concludes my presentation, Rachel. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Bertrand. Some just fascinating numbers in there. And I think that list of challenges is actually a really good thing to put to other panelists. How are they addressing some of these? Because I think it sounds like we need all the good ideas we can get. Next, we've got Lily Green, who is Sustainable Travel Team Lead and is the person that Como works closest with at Transport Scotland. Lily, we really welcome your reflections.
Yes, hi, so I will just share my screen and hopefully this will work. If I go to this one, hopefully, there we go. Are we able to see this?
That's perfect, Lily, thank you.
Let me know, I can't currently see any people.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's perfect.
Sorry, can you just confirm that you can see it?
Lily, that's okay. Can you hear me okay?
Not hearing anything, unfortunately. You can see? Okay, great, thanks. I won't be able to see people. I've just pulled it down so I can see them. But I won't be able to see any cameras or anything. So apologies for that. I also seem to have, for some reason, some delightful drilling that's just started outside, which is the joy of working from home at times, which I'm sure everyone's experienced in the past couple of years. So that continues. So thank you to Bertrand then for really setting the scene regarding our need to kind of reduce emissions and the key role that transport plays in achieving that. I've just joined Transport Scotland, so I'm very much a newbie and working within sustainable and active travel. So we've got a focus on how it is that we create and support effective behaviour change. And then we look at how we can build and improve infrastructure as well to allow active travel to be the natural choice. We're also looking at how it is that we can best provide assets like free bikes for school children, as well as considering how we might best use our kind of record level of funding that Mr. Harvie mentioned earlier towards active travel to really ensure that we deliver against our active travel outcomes for Scotland, and especially when that funding is fully implemented in 24-25. So there's a huge portfolio of work going on that I couldn't possibly try to cover in this session, but we'll highlight a few areas for you in a moment. As many of you will know, we now have that first ever Minister for Active Travel in the UK, in Mr. Harvie, and that record level of investment committed to for active travel specifically. So that's either 10% of the transport budget or 320 million invested in active travel by 24-25. So for context, that's a huge increase from the roughly, I think it was 3.5% of transport budget that was attributed to active travel in 2021. So this is really positive and again a huge commitment that really shows the increasing priority of walking, wheeling and cycling within the Scottish Government as a way to tackle the climate crisis, but also as a way to help create healthier and wealthier communities really. So I mean, many of you already know this, but sustainable travel, sustainability itself is a buzzword that gets used a lot. For us, really, is about that provision of services and infrastructure for that mobility of people, goods, advancing economic and social development to benefit today's and future generations in a manner that is safe, affordable, accessible, efficient, reliant, resilient, and while kind of minimising carbon and other emissions and environmental impacts. So that's quite a lot, and we really form the basis of our global sustainable development goals that are kind of localised by Scotland's national performance framework, really embedded into our long-term strategic plans, and translated into action on the ground really through our funding and delivery plans. So obviously no one single project or programme can achieve all of these outcomes, It really does require a whole system approach, which reframes our way of working and highlights a significant behavioural change that will be a fundamental requirement to us achieving that necessary reduction in car use, and providing those opportunities to increase the levels of walking, wheeling and cycling to help us get there. So I'm sure the sustainable travel hierarchy is familiar to all, and it's really what sits at the heart of our work. Really just capture that mode shift and the choices that will be needed to support that just transition to net zero, and make that significant contribution that we need to tackling kind of global climate change. So as transport officials, mode shift is where we have the most policy levers. But a tool that we would use to look at that from a kind of whole system perspective is that kind of avoid, shift, improve approach. So as you can see from here, it obviously implies a hierarchy, in the same way you would with reduce, reuse, recycle. Reducing waste in that first place is the most efficient action you can take. Not having to do on long journeys, for example, is the most efficient action you could take. So avoiding the need for unnecessary travel in the first place is really a high impact intervention that anyone can make at certain times, obviously, followed by shift and then improve. So, place and placemaking are now widely recognised as an important component of effective active travel strategies, which is of course reflected in our ambitions for NPF4 and kind of fostering 20-minute neighbourhoods and the cross-government place-based framework, really. So again, as Bertrand mentioned, human beings are complex. We do follow, a few basic rules of thumb, which is we prefer paths of least resistance, and we are creatures of habit. We have spent decades engineering the environments around ourselves to make the single occupancy kind of combustion car journey the easiest way of getting about and driving everyone who is able to and could afford it towards this mode of travel. So obviously the mass behaviour change right now that's needed is a huge undertaking, and we're going to have to really re-engineer our environments to make that happen. That means bringing obviously active, shared and public transport choices to people's doorsteps, their neighbourhoods, their workplaces, and making it a part of everyday life, much in the way that the Minister this morning mentioned, having just normal bike sharing, things like that, just outside of a hotel, not just being normal behaviour. So, one of the ways that we're working to do this is working on cross-government policy strategies to support the development and delivery of a nationwide network of mobility hubs. So as many of you might know, these are highly visible, safe and accessible spaces where public, shared and active travel modes are kind of co-located alongside improvements to public realm and community facilities, which is fab. As I mentioned, it's cross-government, so it's not just my team that are involved in that, but a range of teams in Scottish Government, such as low carbon economy, just transition, lots all kind of working on that really and bringing things together. But as we know, the car isn't really going away anytime soon, the private car, and nor do we really want it to completely. Obviously, there's a need for it, especially with those that have disabilities, for example, or other needs. And in a significant number of situations, particularly remote rural locations, the car will likely remain a suitable mode of transport for certain journeys. Not to mention again the logistics sector, for example, which is its own enormous challenge. So there is work to do here though, and we can make these journeys as environmentally friendly as we can. So obviously means supporting renewable energy, alternative fuel systems and technologies, innovative ways of making the most efficient use of vehicles, car and ride share and low carbon logistics. So a bit more detail on some of the stuff, that's kind of again a bit more general, but how is it that we in my team maybe do some of this stuff or work with others to make sure some of this stuff happens. So one of my favourite things is this site. It is the one where you can find a whole host of Transport Scotland supported work that's delivered through a range of adaptive travel delivery partners, from public transport and rideshare to travel hubs, info centres, bike, e-bike, adaptive bike availability, campaigns, community programmes, all that kind of stuff to help make active travel the natural choice. From short journeys, long journeys, to project planning and research. There's lots of things currently going on within Transport Scotland to help support behaviour change and modal shift. So there's lots of opportunities for organisations and others to get involved, community groups and all kinds to kind of focus on some goals that we all kind of share around supporting sustainable and active travel. I mean, a good example we've got here right here is around Access Bikes. So that's a capital grant programme for the purchase of bikes through a network of organisations, targeting those on low incomes, providing support and advice and training to ensure individuals are able to use and maintain their cycles. recently partnered with Spinal Injury Scotland, from my understanding, to provide a handful of e-adapted cycles members to learn. So again, wonderful stuff happening for us. We've got Bikeability, for example, which is on cycle training for children delivered in schools. It's some really incredible work happening there. We've got some level 2 training on road training delivered in 37% of schools in 2021, up from 19% in 1920. So that was like 41,000 pupils across all levels as well. And it's something that's now delivered in 31, I think, local authorities, and we're aiming for 57% of schools in 22-23. So again, another incredible piece of work happening. The Path Fund, so not behaviour change itself, is a perfect example of work that we do that isn't just the huge infrastructure projects like reinvigorating disused train stations, but also look at the important role of effective infrastructure environments really that support modal shift in your regards to your maybe local path. And Paths for All also run the largest behaviour change programme that we fund. So Smarter Choices, Smarter Places, which many of you will have heard of, which really features some significant projects. Some are listed here, such as Rural Connections, and there's direct funding that goes through to local authorities to deliver on shared transport, public transport and active travel initiatives, which is, again, just some really, really incredible work. We've got, again, other pieces of work like Shift, for example, which supports community organisations to deliver behaviour change activities and delivered through Cycling UK, enabling small businesses to unleash the kind of power and potential power of bikes in their service delivery as well. Small revenue grants, structured support package, and inviting guidance that comes with that. So a whole range of things really that are provided through kind of Transport Scotland funding and lots of different areas, working with lots of different organisations to deliver for people really across the whole of Scotland, and a number of different things that help support different elements of behaviour change, whether it's through provision of an asset like a bike, whether it's through making sure you've got a path that you can use, whether it's through the big infrastructure stuff that's going on, or just your general kind of training and making sure you're comfortable, for example, walking in a certain space or cycling in a certain space or wheeling. So again, fantastic stuff that's been going on really that Transport Scotland has been working with delivery partners on, including Como UK, and a range of things that I'm sure Conference will have already heard about or will hear about, on some really incredible wide-ranging stuff, which has been great. I do have to also give some attention to the kind of brilliant work that I've got put up here around kind of the free bikes pilots that we committed to in our programme for government this past year. That has gone down quite well, providing free bikes to school children who can't afford them as well. So this is directly from through Transport Scotland. And this slide is just a quick summary of taking a point in November this year, kind of an update of some of the impact that's had. And it is really wonderful work that has happened. So, again, lots of work happening across our team and our unit to deliver this and consider kind of lessons learned as well from these pilots to understand the best way forward to make kind of maximise the kind of the approach to benefit the most number of people really, and then make kind of help turn that dial on sustainable and active travel. So really kind of my final slide, as I've run through a bunch of things there, is that we are looking at a record level of investment in active travel, for example, in 23-24, but also in 24-25. We're going to be continuing to deliver kind of walking and cycle infrastructure, behaviour change initiatives that are key across Scotland, and working with all of our partners on that, and many organisations as we can to support that kind of modal shift that really is required to turn the dial on what we're, well, really on meeting our outcomes, to be honest. So again, a lot of work to do. We've got to really think about how it is that we work with partners, how it is that we evaluate kind of all of our programmes for behaviour change and things like that, to make sure that, again, we're really doing our absolute best to maximise on the opportunity of record funding in 24-25, so that when we get that, we can really deliver and deliver quickly. So that's kind of my quick summary of sustainable and active travel that we're currently working on. There's loads and loads going on. Obviously, you can reach out. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lily, and Bethlon as well. That's been so useful just to kind of hear all the things that are happening. I'd like to invite Bethlon back up onto the stage as well, if that's possible. Magical tech things will happen, and here he is. I think one of the questions that I've sort of been noticing the theme of in the chat is integration within transport, but also integration within wider government. You know, I think the point was made around demand management, both in terms of demand, but also in terms of avoiding the need to be delivered more holistically across more integrated government. I wonder if you had any thoughts that you might be able to share on that point.
Yeah, I could jump in. And we are totally aware of this need to be a better joined up, at least in national government, but also local government. I like to sell my own policy, the car use reduction, not as a travel or transport policy, but as a place-based policy to make people's living more sustainable. And you will see when the finalized route map is published, we've got a long list of interventions, which include planning, which include digital, because we are making the joints already with these wider cross-cutting policies. I am completely aware that if we are asking people not to travel, i.e. not commute, i.e. working from home, if they don't have a proper digital broadband, is not going to work. So I need to ask my digital colleagues, ensure that Scottish population gets a correct broadband coverage. And this is what we are doing in government. So far, so good.
Thank you for that. I think our rural colleagues on the call will be very glad to hear that connection between digital connectivity and physical connectivity. I think it's a really well-made point that you sort of need to go hand in hand.
Rachel, sorry.
Oh, can't hear me. Ooh.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Okay, Brill. Lily, anything that you want to add on that, or do you feel that Bertrand's done it justice?
I think he's done it pretty well justice. I think, yeah, we're definitely doing our absolute best to work across government, and especially with local authorities to deliver. I think for us, for example, a lot of our work through, for example, Smarter Choices, Smarter Places, direct funding, I think 5 million of funding going direct to those local authorities to deliver solutions that are working for them. So yeah, very much about kind of, I think, connecting and working across lots of different areas, but also making sure that we give that ability to, for example, local authorities and others to deliver as well.
Well, okay, I will have loads more questions for you, but aware that we're sort of relatively tight on time. We've got some great speakers coming up. We've spoken about national government, we've spoken about local authorities, but there is a linchpin in the middle of that, which is regional transport partnerships. So next joining me on our screen is Anna. Anna is from SESTRAN's Senior Partnership Manager, Anna Harriman. I will hand over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Rachel, and hello, everybody. Yes, I work for SESTRAN, which stands for South East of Scotland Regional Transport Partnership, and there are 7 regional transport partnerships in Scotland. Rachel's asked me to talk for about 7 minutes, so you'll be pleased to hear it won't go on too long, but what I'd like to just cover is the rationale behind regional, what we do strategically, and then the kind of projects that we do that support shared transport, because we absolutely see sharing as being a central lever in getting to where we need to be. Hold on a minute. Having not spoken for half an hour. Pardon. Okay, so regional transport partnerships are statutory bodies which really grew originally on a voluntary basis, where a number of local authorities saw that, in fact, people don't live just within a local authority, they move between them. They may work in one, live in another, have to shop in another, have kids somewhere else, use childcare elsewhere. And in fact, in Scotland, with 32 local authorities, people are moving all the time. And whilst we're talking now about a much stronger localism agenda and people working from home, the reality for a lot of Scotland is that you might, in fact, if you're a nurse that works in a hospital, working from home is not going to be an option, and living in cities might not be affordable. So there's going to be movement, and we need to make that sustainable. That rationale, that recognition that people do move, was the reason for starting up RTPs in, I think the first ones on a voluntary basis came in around about late 90s. They were formalized in 2005. That geography, the geography that Sestran covers, we have a city, we have deep rural, we have every form of urban to rural classification in our area. And so there are diverse communities. We have huge areas of deprivation, ex-coal mining towns. We have people that have transport poverty by dint of both socioeconomic deprivation, but also physical distance and disconnectivity. So what we do as regional transport partnerships, our core function is to bring together a strategy, and that strategy says what needs to happen to make sustainable transport better and more integrated and more accessible. The last couple of years in Sestran, I've been involved in, not closely, but I've been involved in the rewrite of a regional transport strategy, completely new one. Around about 2019, there was a huge policy shift and change, and I think we all saw that. And that much clearer, crisper articulation of climate challenges, I think, started around about then. And then we went into COVID. So over this period, we've been writing and have now completed a new regional transport strategy. That provides a framework for all the local authorities in our area to target what they want to do around transport and make sure that it fits in with that wider picture. Remember, local authorities initially voluntarily set these up. So we add value, we help to coordinate. What did we see in the analysis then, when we were developing this? We discovered some really, really interesting stuff. We looked at transport statistics that have been available for ages, but we looked at them in a new way, and we were starting to ask new questions of the stats. We were trying to look at origin destination pairing, and well, where are people really traveling? And what we discovered is, in fact, around the city where there's very good public transport networks, we're seeing quite a lot of sustainable travel activity. We're also seeing that 60% of commuter car journeys in our region have nothing to do with the city. But we have spent 50 years developing what we call hub and spoke model, where you have arterial routes that take people in corridors to the city centre, and nothing that sort of spider web connects up the area. So we don't have that kind of fine-grained sustainable public transport network across our region. We have something that drives people into the centre. If you don't want to do that, if you want to move in a different way, it's going to be really hard, except if you take a car. So that was a really interesting piece of work that we've done. And why is that important? How does that relate to shared transport? I will get onto it. Most of Scotland's population lives in towns and villages. And whilst we talk about localism, unless we had control of some of the really big levers like NHS and where they put doctors' surgeries, etc., we have to be realistic that we're going to still need to support people travelling. And what we don't want is people becoming car dependent and communities becoming car dependent. We already have enough of that. We need to step back. We need to facilitate those people that are car dependent getting a hold of better and sustainable options. What we've done is we've analysed the corridors that people need to travel on and looked at the development areas to say, okay, well, where's all the new housing coming in, and well, how will that feed into what we're seeing as demand to do certain journeys and what might be provided. And then what we've got really a blueprint for the future. And I think what I'd like to do is just read you, from a piece of paper how we are talking about our aim for our new strategy. We are creating a region in which sustainable modes of transport are easier, more appealing, and accessible for all to use. That's it. We're trying, it's I guess a call to action, but what we really want is the simplicity of that message to get across to people when we communicate what our RTS is. And I probably should have just said that to you up front. So what do we do about shared transport and where does it fit in? Well, all of the project work that CESTRAN delivers fits into that regional transport strategy. That is our kind of Bible for the work that we do. And for a number of years, we've been working on shared mobility. We started with Go e-bike around 2017. CESTRAN was one of the first in the UK to start to think about what e-bikes really meant for travel. We think they increase the range people can cover by sustainable means significantly. So it makes active travel decision maker from a transport planner point of view. They're not talking then about 2 or 3 miles. They're talking about, oh, maybe 10, maybe 8, maybe 10, maybe 12. You know, this is becoming a reality. And if we can create accessibility for e-bikes, we've got a winning formula if we've got the infrastructure for regional routes. So we started investing with money from Share North, a share mobility project that was a European funded Interreg project. We funded a number of e-bikes across the region. We prioritized areas that were high in multiple deprivation indicators. So we didn't go for the low-lying easy fruit, let's just put them in a city centre. We said, well, where won't people get access to these bikes? And why shouldn't they have them? We did that through a combination of working with community groups like Clear in Buckhaven in the east of Fife, where they use those bikes as a shared resource. But we also helped set up Forth Environment Links, very, very successful Forth Bikes hire scheme. And from that, we went into a second phase of Go e-bike, which has now got hire schemes in East Lothian and Mid Lothian. It's small at scale, but we want to increase that. And I think that the exciting words of the Minister really give us hope that, in fact, we might now be able to start to produce at scale and deliver for communities at scale. And that's what we need to do. But the other thing, and this is where we kind of intersect with the wonderful Como UK, is that we do a lot around mobility hubs. And we did a strategic study of mobility hubs in our region to say, well, what's the rationale? Where could we put these? And we've identified a number of locations. And off the back of that, we've been able to support and add value to what our councils are doing. I'll give you an example. Fife Council is working very hard with Network Rail on the extension of the Leven Railway. Massively exciting rail project that will connect up an otherwise disconnected community, allow people to get access to employment markets. But we're working with them to say, well, it's going to be more than a railway, because when you get off a train, you don't want to then be car captive. So looking at the real opportunities for implementing mobility hubs and doing the kind of boring, dry, number crunching behind the scenes studies, we've been able to fund that and support that. So that's the kind of way we can add value to shared mobility. And I suppose then that just brings me to sort of wrap it all up and come back to regional. As I said, most of Scotland lives in towns and villages. And whilst it's very easy to do projects in cities because there's a concentration of people, it's kind of easy to convince governments to fund things in cities. But where there's a real challenge and where we think we can add value is supporting that bit around the edge, that sort of less easy to service, less seemingly economically viable transition that needs to happen. And as we see housing development continue to spread out right around our region, we see an absolutely huge opportunity and imperative to tackle this now, get in there, make shared mobility absolutely central in new housing developments save space on parking, put shared mobility in, create more houses with the space you've saved, but give people a reason not to become in debt to car loan, give people a reason not to have a second car, which they then sort of feel they need to sweat that asset and get everything out of it they can, give people a reason to make healthy choices and really connect with their neighbours. So where we're looking at for the future is something that integrates with land use planning and supports our local authorities. I think I'll leave it there, Rachel. That's been a very quick run through.
What an amazing call to action, Anna. Thank you so much. Just absolutely crowned full of great information, and what a punt as well for Como's new development work, which I'm hoping one of my colleagues is about to smoothly put into the chat for you all to download and learn from. Anna, one of the things that I think is, you touched on it, but I'd like to delve into it a wee bit further, is that balance of the 15-20 minute neighbourhood, very localised services, very localised communities. I mean, you went as far as to mention your neighbours, but at the same time, how you address that from a regional perspective, because I think, you know, that challenge is obviously so applicable in somewhere like the Sestran region, where people are travelling significant distances for work, they're often commuting into the city. How do you get that balance?
Well, I think we need to be really, really honest and say this isn't a transport solution that's needed here. This is a planning solution, and this sits within the planning system. But I think it's also about going back to the days when we worked holistically across all of our public sector kind of efforts, and we still do that, but I think we've had so much change in terms of the climate agenda that I think we've kind of gotten away from some of the tactical stuff, and it's the tactical stuff we need to get back to. So when you look at a community, the absolute heart of that community is a school. The school gates are where lifelong friendships will be made. Inside the school is where lifelong friendships will be made. Accessing that central point, I think if we focus on that, and I think if we start to build out from that, we put school streets in, we encourage bike networks and bike buses and walking schemes to schools, I think we can start to build the best of 15-minute neighbourhoods in whatever location or community you live in. The realities then of regional high schools being further away, that's a question of sort of infrastructure and support and safe cycling routes that young girls and boys or any gender will feel confident using. And I think that's really important too. I think we can't do everything, so we need to choose a single intervention point, and that's my sort of suggestion, is that's where we start.
Anna, thanks so much for that. I first encountered Anna about 4 years ago. Sestran put out a report on DDRT, so digital demand responsive transport, which was just one of the most interesting, well put together things that I had read of all the multitude of transport things that had come across my desk. And it really got me interested in DDRT, and it's something that for Como is relatively new, but it's something that one of our speakers is going to join us and talk about now. So Anna, thanks so much. We'll come back with more questions for you at the end of the session, but we're now going to be joined by Amelie Sundberg, who's Partnerships Principal for VIA. Amelie, let me hand over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. What a smooth transition, Rachel. Thank you. So yes, as Rachel said, my name is Amelie Sundberg, and I'm just trying to share my screen here. Give me 1 second.
Ooh, an exciting move. We have lost Amelie altogether, which obviously was not part of the course. So I am going to divert wildly down our list of speakers and ask Martin to join us on the stage. Martin is International Development for Berwegan, who provide a huge amount of the bike share that we enjoy in Scotland. But the most notable thing about Martin for me at the moment is he's in Montreal. So Martin, what time is it with you, and how very grateful should we be that you've been able to join us this morning? Thank you so very much. I'll hand over to you to tell us a bit about bike share in Scotland.
Yes, great. Thank you, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, indeed, I'm in Montreal right now. It's a little bit early, but it's 5:30 a.m. So I'm sorry if my voice sounds a little groggy, and I hope I won't face the same challenges as Lily in that I suddenly disappear on you. So I will try and share my screen as well, and I hope that you will be able to see it. Let me put this in full screen. Let me know if you can.
Perfect. Thank you. That's
yes,
great.
you can see it. Great. And I'm still here, so that's great as well. So yes, thank you to Coma UK for having us, Be Vegan, on this conference, on this panel. I'll dive right into it because obviously we have a little bit of limited time. So Be Vegan, we're a Canadian Quebec company. And we pride ourselves in having what we call a 360-degree offer. So we really do everything from A to Z when it comes to bike share. So we manufacture and design everything that goes around bike share. That's from a hardware perspective, so the bikes, the stations, and obviously as well the IT behind it. So commonly the mobile app that users will use to take a bike, to see where the stations are, etc. And of course, from an operating perspective, we create the whole back office as well. So from our experience as an operator as well, we can really develop also everything that we need ourselves as an operator. And then obviously in some cases around the world, we're not the operator that is doing the bike share, it's the city themselves or it's a third party. So we're really work on that to create the best and most advanced tool for users and for operators. Obviously, there's so many more aspects within bike share when it comes to customer service, but also we have created a solution that is entirely white label. So we have many systems in the UK, and most people wouldn't know that Be Vegan is the company behind it, and that's in some way the way we want it to be, because we want to create an identity around bike share. We want people to use the bike share and create an identity with it and create a link with it, because it will really make them feel part of the community and vice versa, and start using mainly the electric assist bikes as a daily commute tool, but also in terms of more recreational transport. And I'll get to that point a little bit further. A little bit of background on Be Vegan itself, and as I mentioned, we're from Quebec. One thing that always kind of raises some eyebrows is that most people think that the company is a Dutch company, because obviously the name Be Vegan or Bewegen, it doesn't sound very Canadian or French Canadian. That's actually because from a historical standpoint, the founders of Be Vegan were in bike share, working with other systems, and mainly the Montreal system, and they wanted to create a Dutch cycling culture here in North America, and that obviously came with developing everything around it. So the perfect bike in terms of transport. And to kind of honor the Dutch culture, they gave it a Dutch name, and obviously it has the link with active mobility. We've implemented over near 5,000 bikes worldwide, and out of the 30 systems, well, we have 5 now in Scotland itself, and in terms of those systems, they're growing as well. And to kind of give you an overview, you will see that there's a variation in terms of size when it comes to systems. Also a big difference between public and private systems as well. We're very proud to launch very soon in Calderwood in a private system. So it's really we can really see a shift there as well, that it's not only the cities and the councils that are looking for bike share, it's also developers, entrepreneurs that see the benefit either to bring it to their community. So the Calderwood Bikes is a private system, but with their goal making it a public system over time, so that the towns and the region adopts more stations and integrate within it. And as you can see that in Scotland, we're the supplier and the operator. So we do really everything in team with the city, with the transport organizations, Sestran obviously being one of our major partners in mainly in the Mid Lothian and East Lothian area for the Go e-bike system. A couple of pictures. Unfortunately, I didn't have a very nice one of Mr. Harvie, who was there for the Fort William. So I just put a picture of the station, which is the top right. And as you can see on the bike, it's even nicely identified. So kind of to give you an idea, as you will see two bikes that look the same, but they're not in the same location. We tried something very unique, I must say, in terms of bike share. We see a lot of suppliers of bike share technology that will keep their name, and that you'll find it around many cities using the same app, and that's obviously a great way of promoting bike share as well. But what we do is we want to really create an identity locally, and so the Hightrans organization and the Loch Harbour Environmental Group, they both wanted the bike share. This is in Inverness and Fort William, and obviously they're not right next door to each other, but they're in the same system with their own identity in terms of bikes as well. And what is quite unique is that they use the same app and everything. And although you cannot cycle from one place to the other, users that have the Fort William membership or Inverness, they can use it in either system. So it really creates an integration between towns. So we've created in the past what we call regional systems. So that's the Forth Bike in the Forth Valley is a prime example that stretches from Stirling to Falkirk to Alloa and many more communities. So that really integrates neighboring towns and cities. But the high bike system is quite unique because they're not next to each other, but they still integrated together. So that obviously enables for systems to integrate also from an, how shall I say, from an initial investment point of view and capital cost. It's a way to reduce those costs, but also from an operating standpoint. Obviously, operating in Inverness and in Fort William, it makes it easier to use the same back office system. One element that we work a lot on is obviously community engagement, getting more users on the bikes, promoting it through various events, and basically making bike share more accessible and more popular. So obviously we work a lot on the marketing aspect. We do that ourselves, but we do that as well with the councils, with transport organizations, and to kind of give you an idea on how we've seen things develop is quite important, especially during the COVID time. So I kind of give you some information per system. Obviously, how we kind of approach these things, there's the traditional promoting the systems and working together, but we also look at trends. And that can be seen as a global, as we discussed during just these types of events, knowing what's happening in other cities, of course, because we find it really important, but also looking locally, what's happening in each station, which area. So to kind of give you a quick overview is Forth Bike, we've seen a large number of users coming from outside of the system area, whereas in the beginning, we saw a lot of local people mainly living in Stirling or in Falkirk coming while using the system there. whereas we've seen a large increase, and I'm talking about 40% increase of users coming outside of the Forth Valley. So that really attracts users as well to the area. So that shows that bike share is not only for local residents. And we've seen an increase of 85% of day passes and paper rides. So really see that people come to an area, take a bike to visit the region. And
Martin, sorry, can I jump in there? Sorry, we're just running a bit tight on time.
All right, I will just give you an idea, and I will be more than happy to share all these slides as well. Just one last note, we've worked a lot as well on mass integration, so that really create one global mobility platform, which is obviously on different levels, but the mass integration that we did in Inverness with Hightrans has been really very popular for us, and that's something that we want to really do globally, and especially throughout Scotland. So feel free to reach out. I've also put the credentials of my colleague Reese, who's the community outreach and business developer in Scotland specific, and we work together on promoting bike share and getting people to use it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martin, and my apologies for cutting you off there. There's just so much great information that I think each speaker could have had an hour to themselves, but we'll move briefly quickly on, if that's okay, to Mike. Mike is Car Club Coordinator with LEAP. Mike, tell us all about how communities can contribute to the shared transport future of Scotland.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I will do my best. I know you're pushing the time, so I'll try and rattle through it. I'm the project manager of LEAP. I'm here to talk about our independent car club, which I've helped to run since 2014. LEAP is an acronym for Local Energy Action Plan. It's a Scottish charitable incorporated organisation based in Lochwinnock, Renfrewshire, and we work across Renfrewshire. Our objectives are to advance environmental protection and improvement by promoting and empowering and enabling sustainable communities. As part of this, LEAP Car Club was established in 2012 in Lochwinnock with support from Car Plus, or the predecessor to Como here. We currently operate a small fleet of 5 vehicles, 3 EVs and 2 hybrids across 2 locations. And this year our cars will have made over 1,000 journeys. Going back though, I thought it might be useful to give you some background about the history of our car club and how we got to where we are now. As you can imagine, it's been a big learning curve, so I hope it's useful. As I say, we began 10 years ago in Lochwinnock, which is a village of about 3,000 odd people, about 20 miles southwest of Glasgow. Crucially, in terms of it being a successful car club location, the village has a reasonable public transport link with bus and train access and a car park where the cars are based and no more than about 10 minutes walk from most people in the village. Initially, we began with 1 small and then 2 small diesel cars in Lochwinnock. But back then, the cars were accessed by key safes and the journeys were recorded with physical trip sheets in the cars. In 2014, again with support from Car Plus, we bought our first electric car, a Nissan Leaf, and convinced the council to install a charge point at the community centre in Lochwinnock. At this stage, we were getting our insurance and booking system through a third party called Morecar. However, it was a bit expensive and we didn't have much control over any changes that we wanted to make. So in 2015, we managed to move over to Zurich for insurance, which was fortunate given the challenges independent operators now have getting insurance. We're still insured by Zurich and pay about £1,100 per car for coverage. We also moved our car booking system over to Superstas, which was being successfully used by another independent car share, Moray Car Share, which is very cheap to run. While we've had success in Lochwinnock at the time, we were not successful in other small villages. We tried in Bridge of Weir or later Kilbarchan. Both these villages are a bit more sprawling than Lochwinnock and do not have the same level of public transport links, making people more car reliant there, which made the car club a trickier proposition. Over in 2017, we started a pilot scheme in the town of Linwood in partnership with Linstone Housing Association. A car club feasibility study commissioned by Como had shown that Linwood might work as a successful location. Linstone saw the benefits the car club would have in replacing staff grey fleet, also for the tenants whose usage they were able to subsidise. Linstone paid us a flat monthly fee to cover staff usage and set a number of subsidised tenant hours. This meant that tenants were able to access the car for only £1.50 an hour. Having set the monthly payment from Linstone, it gives us a really strong base to work from in terms of covering operating costs, which we were able to augment with hires in non-tenant residents. Initially, we started there with one diesel car, but we're soon able to replace that with a hybrid car. And the pilot was judged a success by ourselves and Linstone, and it put us in a good position when the Energy Saving Trust announced its plugged-in household program, which was a program funding to enable housing associations to procure electric car club services. Linstone were able to get that funding, which enabled us to bring 2 more EVs to Linwood in autumn 2019. It also enabled us at the time to, or helped us at the time to bring telematics across our fleet, which meant we could ditch the trip sheets, the physical trip sheets, and make things easier from admin and resource point of view. We did keep our key safes, however, because just for we had accessibility concerns about going keyless, because not all of our members have smartphones or can use them confidently. Usage was encouraging as we started, but obviously it came to a halt in 2020 when the pandemic hit and lockdown came. But when travel restrictions eased, both our car locations saw a massive surge in usage, probably driven by the behavior changes as a result of the pandemic. And we had by that time also brought in a new electric car into Lochwinnock as well as a hybrid as well. So we were we had 3, that's when we went to 3 electric cars and 2 hybrid cars. It's been great to see how popular the car club's been since travel restrictions are lifted. It's kind of been a great reward for all the hard work that we've put in to get us to this point. It's also been particularly heartening to see the success in Linwood, because it is one of the most deprived areas in Scotland according to the SMID index. And in partnership with Linstone, we've been able to remove access barriers to electric cars that otherwise may have existed, as well as save members their money. If I was to reflect on the things that led us to having a relatively successful car club, I'd say it boils down to several factors. Firstly, it's been vital for us to provide sufficient staff resources to maintain a good level of community engagement, marketing, and member support. There are barriers that have to be overcome, i.e. how does a car club work? How does an electric car work? How does it charge? How do you drive an automatic car? Obviously, these can be overcome, and we have overcome them, but they require active engagement with communities to educate and build trust. This has been especially important in recent months, given how erratic and unreliable we found the charging infrastructure to be, which can erode the trust in EVs. Secondly, getting the location of the cars right is vital. You need to know there's a potential member base there. So in our experience, that means having cars that are easily accessible, with having good transport links so the car club can fit in as part of a transport option, and there's not a residential base who are reliant on car ownership as much. It can also be advantageous to have a partner organisation to support the car club there, as we did with Linstone. We're also we've been working with them for 5 years, and we're about to launch an e-bike scheme with them as well. The partnership has been so good on both sides, so hopefully that'll be in the spring. Another factor worth considering is just whether you can run the car club as part of a larger organisation, because that can help with overhead costs and also marketing and word of mouth, and kind of a brand trust issue. Despite our successes up to this point, we're still not fully self-sustainable. Throughout our 10 years, we've always relied on funding to supplement higher income, and is a model that we'll continue with today. In recent years, for example, we benefit from funding from the Climate Challenge Action Fund, Paths for All, Smart Choices, Smarter Places Fund, EST's Plugged In Households Fund via Linstone Housing, and Brentfordshire Council, amongst others.
Thank you, Mike. I'm so sorry to be cutting you off. I
was literally on the last bit, but I tried to rush.
No, go on then, go on.
No, it's fine, don't worry, it's fine.
Okay, I've got a question for all the operators at the end, but I'm going to be an outraged chair and over on the session by 5 minutes so we can fit Via in as well. Amelie, please do go for as neat and tight as possible, because I have a question for you, Mike, and Martin, that I'd love to put to all of you and get your expertise. Thank you so much. Amelie, we can see your presentation. Please do head on. I can see Emily, but I'm wondering if she can maybe not see or hear me. So I'm going to ask my colleague to take her down. And
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, what a nightmare. I'm so sorry, everyone.
No, not at all. Do just jump in.
Yeah, I'm jumping in. I'm going to keep it to 3 minutes, and I'm particularly upset because Rachel gave me such a lovely launch pad and runway to start the call. And I now have the challenge of keeping everyone entertained for 2 minutes, during which they should be in their coffee break. So bear with me. My name is Emily, Partnerships Principal at VIA. What is VIA? We are one of the leading providers globally for public mobility solutions, particularly digital demand responsive transport, or DDRT. So before I jump into explaining why this is such a critical part of achieving net zero in Scotland, just quickly cover the basics of what digital DRT is. It's certainly not new in essence. Historical dial-a-ride schemes have existed for a long time across the UK and elsewhere and in Scotland. But at the moment, with technology, we can improve the way that this is done and how it's accessible to communities, particularly in rural areas, low density areas, and for those that have underutilized bus routes. So this can be relevant in a number of different use cases. If we move on to the next slide. So digital DRT it's not a new concept anymore. It's actually grown exponentially across the world over the past decade. And this is just a glimpse of VIA's number of deployments across the world. And then we also have a map of the current situation in the UK, including Scotland. And so this is a bit of a call to action from us to say that Scotland is a little bit behind. We haven't seen the same amount of public funding and centralized support for DRT in Scotland yet, but we're very excited to see that the STPR2 does call for investment in DRT as one of its key recommendations for climate action. So we're very hopeful that this map will look quite different very soon. If we go to the next slide. So why do we so strongly believe in digital DRT for the climate? There are primarily 3 reasons, and these are all linked to reducing congestion, reducing emissions, and fundamentally getting people out of their private car and onto shared modes. So the first one is that it encourages modal shift. The second is that it provides a more efficient use of fleets if we are going to be using vehicles. And then it also helps to integrate with other forms of low emission transportation. And I'm going to quickly explain each of these in a little bit more detail. So if we go to the next slide. So fundamentally, like Bertrand and Lily said, we're talking about behavior change, and active travel is fantastic, but we need to get people out of their private cars and onto public transportation. And in order to do that, we need to have a compelling proposition that's digitally enabled and meets the expectation of a modern passenger, is convenient and is reliable, and also expands access to public transportation in areas where big buses on country lanes simply doesn't make any sense. And we're seeing that digital DRT can be a crucial way to do exactly this. So, for example, in our very rural scheme across Wales, we've seen that 73% of passengers using the DRT scheme say that they're actually driving their own private car less than they were before. Another example is with Hanover, with our scheme called Sprinty, where 1/3 of the trips that are taken are actually replacing what people said would have been done with a private car. So that's the first one, modal shift. Second one. If we go to the next slide, yeah, perfect. So this comes down to efficiency and optimizing how we're using the vehicles that are on the road. So there's 2 ends to the spectrum. There's simple through to sophisticated. On the simple end, what our technology does is it minimizes the number of detours you have to do in order to pick up new passengers to share that journey, and it optimizes the route that a vehicle takes. So you're reducing the vehicle time per passenger and therefore the congestion and emission per passenger. On the more sophisticated end, you can actually start to what we call commingle or share your vehicles to serve different passenger groups. So whether that's your dial-a-ride, your school transport, or your DRT in rural areas, let's serve all of those with one service. And in fact, that's what we're already doing with, for example, Coventry Transport for West Midlands. So third and final point is, if we go to the next slide, is that digital DRT, of course, should never stand alone. And actually it spans across two parts of that hierarchy that Lily was talking about. So you've got your private car that's being shared, and then you've got public transportation. And DRT fits into supporting the energy transition through this in two ways. So directly, if we're using the setup of new DRT schemes as an opportunity to procure new EV fleets, that's an obvious way, and we're already doing that with EV-specific software functionalities. And indirectly, we can make sure that through the journey planning tool on the app booking, that you're actually feeding people into broader public transport networks after they've used the DRT component. So those are my three key points. If we go to the next slide, that's just my conclusion. Let's get to that reduction in 20% car kilometers. If we're going to do that, we've got to get people out of their private car, and DDRT can help us do that. Thank you. That's me.
Thank you so much. Guys, if you are coming to the Edinburgh drinks this evening, Emily will be at them, as she is very kindly buying the first round. So, you know, there's a good invocation to come hear more about DDRT and the brilliant stuff that Vera are doing all across the country. Can I please have Mike and Martin join me? We are so pressed for time, but all of you, I'm sure, will know, and Como research shows year on year, that once somebody's used shared once, they're hooked. They see the benefits of it, and they're super, super involved. So what I really want to ask you is, how do we get people into that very first journey, that day one of using whatever shared transport mode you operate? How do we get people onto that bike, into that car, onto that minibus? How do we get people going? A sentence answer is all we have time for. Does anyone want to jump in with how we get people engaged? Martin, go for it.
For us, what has so far worked is really the community engagement part. Going to events, being present, showcasing the bike, showcasing how it works, and obviously also from a more financial standpoint is working with promotions, discount codes, and everything to get them to try it once, and then they've gotten the wow factor, and they're starting to use it more regularly.
Thank you for that so much, Martin. Emily, you unmuted next, and then Mike will finish with you.
Great. So yeah, community engagement is critical right at the beginning through to the end. People don't like change, make them feel they're part of that change and not that the change is happening to them. So involve them in consultations for the plan of the design and make sure that you're really making them feel heard. And then prove the concept. Once you've put something on the ground that's working, people tend to come on board really quickly. So even if you do face a bit of resistance, push through if you believe in your solution, and I'm sure you'll end up convincing people.
Amazing. Thank you, Emily. And Mike, last but very much not least.
Yeah, it's hard work, it's community engagement, it's building trust, and so people trust what you're doing and are confident that it'll work.
Amazing. Thank you. Emily mentioned slick movements, but how's this for slick? Community engagement is the topic that we've all ended on as key to behaviour change. And the next session is the power of community sustainability in action at 11:15. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for sticking with us into your coffee break. A massive thank you to our speakers and to the Minister for joining us. There are brilliant things happening in Scotland. Please do get in touch. Thank you so much.